Good morning, everyone. My name is Adriana Serna. I am the Director of Communications for CHTA, the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. And on behalf of CHTA and our strategic partner, Mastercard, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Tourism Insights Driven by Big Data. This webinar is one of the many benefits that CHTA offers its members. As most of you know, CHTA summer events are right around the corner, and early bird registration will be ending soon. So go ahead and go to our website, which is www.caribbeanhotelandtourism.com, to find out more and register. One of the 3 events that will be happening this June will be Chief, which is our educational forum, Taste of the Caribbean, which is a food and beverage educational forum, as well as a culinary competition, and Caribbean 305, which is a celebration of everything Caribbean. The Caribbean is coming to Miami, and it's going to be a wonderful party, so we hope to see you all there. In addition to our events, you can also, as a CHTA member, access information and business intelligence through our CHTA Knowledge and Data Center. And also open to everyone is the Caribbean Tourism Job Bank that allows member companies to post jobs and also applicants that are looking for positions in the hospitality and tourism space to apply for positions in the Caribbean hospitality and tourism industry. So we have lots to offer you. For more information on CHTA and its membership, go ahead and send an email to membership@caribbeanhotelandtourism.com, and we'll be more than happy to provide you with all the information you might need. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, and her name is Antonia Stroeh. Did I pronounce that correctly? No.
Antonia Stroeh, close.
Stroeh, oh, so close. Okay. She is the Senior Vice President for Government and Development for Mastercard Advisors. She leads the team over in Mastercard that's responsible for business development with governments and the public sector entities to promote inclusive economic growth. She joined Mastercard in 2012 and is part of the Global Prepaid Product team. And she started her career as a consultant working with Fortune 500 companies to improve salesforce effectiveness. And she got an MBA from Princeton and an MBA from Columbia Business School. Of course, Mastercard is a strategic partner. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer over the reins of our webinar to Antonia. Antonia, let me know when you've got it.
Great, that is wonderful. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Adriana, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar on Tourism Insights Driven by Big Data. As Adriana stated, my name is Antonia. I work at Mastercard, and I'm very grateful to Adriana and the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association for allowing me to present some of our latest insights and tourism solutions to you this morning. I'd like to start with a quick disclaimer, though. For those of you who are not familiar with Mastercard, contrary to popular perception, we are not a credit card issuer. We are a technology network. We connect 20,000 banks with 50 million retailers, over 2 billion cardholders. What that means is that we process about 50 billion transactions every year, and that is the data that we can leverage in an aggregate and anonymized form to help governments, to help retailers, hotels, to help banks understand global trends and consumer behaviors better. And that brings us to the topic of the day, tourism. So why is tourism important to us? Hold on, I'm having trouble here. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but let me just say it, tourism is one of the most important economic sectors globally. It is growing faster than other sectors. It is creating good quality jobs. It's creating infrastructure investment, cross-border spend, and driving the inclusive economic growth that Mastercard hopes to achieve in the markets that we serve. In the Caribbean alone, of course, tourism as a sector contributed $57 billion US in 2017 and employed some 2.5 million people. But there are also challenges facing the sector. Global competition is increasing. Tourism is shifting towards emerging economies from developed markets, growing faster in emerging economies. And people are going to more exotic locations, if you will. Consumers are turning to dozens of sites and social media and different digital sources in order to plan their trips and their travel, making it more difficult to understand their behaviors and more difficult to reach them. And the quote-unquote phenomenon of over-tourism is in some cases degrading citizens' quality of life and challenging sustainability, and really throwing the existing model of tourism into question. So in response to these challenges, we at Mastercard, we took a step back and we looked at our data sets to see how we can help. And we realized that our data on commercial activity and consumer purchases can be combined with other third-party data of tourist behaviors, so as to create a single platform that provides insights into the behaviors, into the sentiments, and into the spending behaviors of consumers across their entire travel journey. And in turn, of course, help optimize marketing investments by governments and by companies so as to attract the most valuable tourists. Let's look at one indication of how tourism behavior has changed. This is quite a busy slide, but as I like to tell the story, 20 years ago when my mother was planning the family summer vacation, she would go to one single travel agent. She would book flights, choose hotels, choose tour operators, maybe get a rental car as well, everything through one single point of information, right? Today, when I'm planning summer vacation, I start searching 3 months in advance. I am inspired by what I read on TripAdvisor. I see what my friends tweet and Instagram about. I go and check for the best prices. I then might even stop by a travel agent and inform myself better. And there's this incredible funnel. 38 different travel sites on average is what the U.S. consumer at least goes to before actually starting out on their journey. And this creates an enormous amount of data that is harder to digest and harder to action. And that really is at the heart of our solution. So new insights and also new approaches in terms of marketing are needed to effectively compete in this sector. On the one hand, digital tools the use of digital tools will only continue to accelerate. There's more and more data touch points and more data also generated by travelers' actions, right? Especially among the younger generations. For example, shocking number, 84% of millennials are likely to plan a trip based on someone else's vacation photos or social media updates, right? Secondly, the tourism organizations that we speak to, for example, here just two examples, one in Thailand, one in Singapore, the overarching message that we hear really is a need for better insights into which tourists are coming, how do they behave, and then how can our tourism boards better target and better attract the quote-unquote most attractive tourists, the higher spending, higher quality tourists that drive real value to the economy and real job growth. So that is the challenge that we set ourselves. A short summary of what we have to offer, if you will. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of data. That data is not personally identifiable information, right? Mastercard has no view of your name, of your demographics, of where you live. What Mastercard sees is where a card number is used to make a specific purchase for a specific amount at a specific date and time. That data is therefore limited by all means. However, it is global. And by aggregating it in an anonymized fashion, it actually starts to reveal global trends in travel. We felt that data in itself was not enough. We set ourselves the target of creating a 360-degree view of the full travel life cycle. So what we do is we merge in information on searching. If I'm starting to search for my summer vacation, and I go to Google and to other websites, and I start putting in different Caribbean destinations, where are the people who are searching that way located? What is the funnel between searching and then checking out pricing of airlines and hotels to actually booking? The booking data we receive from the big GDSs. We blend in behavior, by which we mean our spend data. So once I am in my vacation spot, where am I spending? What am I spending on? Right? And then lastly, but I think most importantly, this notion of sharing. What am I tweeting and Instagramming about while I'm on vacation and when I come back home? Are my social media posts positive, neutral, or negative? What specifically do I tweet about in a specific location? What are the attractions that I find most relevant? What this data does together is to cover the full travel life cycle, both before and after the trip, for a deeper understanding of the patterns that tourists are showing in order to then be able to action this data so as to better inform marketing campaigns, so as better to inform investment decisions, etc. So in the next few slides, I just wanted to cover some of the use cases before we actually jump into the portal. Sorry. So for example, these are screenshots of the platform that we'll be looking at in just a minute. A key question that we often get asked is, who's actually the most profitable visitor? Where's my most profitable visitor coming from? And also, what kind of services, what kind of categories do these visitors spend on? You can imagine there are big differences in spend behaviors. For example, both Russians and Chinese tourists spend a lot of money when they go to the Mediterranean. Russians tend to spend very little on accommodation, theory being that they probably rent private villas, frankly, or own private villas. Chinese predominantly spend on retail, right? They're very high in shopping. Germans, I'm German myself, so I can say this, are more tight-fisted. We spend a lot on rental cars, frankly. We don't spend a lot on restaurants or accommodations. So you can start to understand not just who is the most valuable customer coming to your destination in terms of spend, but you can also think about what type of behaviors do these tourists show? How could that inform my marketing messages in different markets? We also look at the individual attractions that different destinations offer. So for example, here we happen to be looking at Dubai. Dubai has a range of attractions from cultural to, of course, shopping to restaurants, etc. And we can see that travelers from different origin countries, from the UAE itself, from the UK, from the US, make use of different offers, right? Sunbathing is far more exciting from somebody coming from the UK or the US than it is somebody coming from the UAE itself, which actually makes sense. We can also look at where on maps, essentially, tourists from different origins are congregating. What are they interested in? Which venues do they go to? Is there actually a pattern in terms of their movement across this destination? And finally, we can look at competitors. So for example, if I am Dubai, I might want to compare myself to Singapore. I want to understand how the tourism mix is different from Singapore, how the growth is different from Singapore, how I compare with Singapore on different attractions, be they active lifestyle, gastronomic, cultural, etc. Sunbathing, for example, is better in Dubai than it is in Singapore, as this chart shows. That's a fact. And we can also look at the sentiment of tourists, a sort of a perception index, we call it. How much of social media is actually positive versus negative. So generally, how happy are tourists from different origin markets with my destination? So in short, our hope is that this deeper understanding, by leveraging big data from multiple sources, this deeper understanding of different visitors can help destinations and can help retailers grow their tourism revenue, whether that's from making more targeted marketing decisions that allow you to target marketing spend, reach the right origin countries, and also construct the right marketing message to reach each individual origin market. Or it's about making smarter investments, understanding where tourists go and what which attractions they really value the most. All of this based on timely, accurate data, aggregated and anonymized, fully in line with global data usage practices, updated monthly, and with a modular pricing schedule that should fit most budgets. And then employing on this large array of data, the artificial intelligence and the natural language search capabilities that allow us to parse things like search behaviors, like hotel evaluations, and like social media sentiment. One case study that I wanted to share is from a city, a European city, which essentially wanted to attract more shoppers during the holiday season in particular, the Christmas holiday season. Their initial hypothesis was that tourists coming from nearby markets would actually be the most attractive shoppers. We looked at more than 2 million mentions from social media networks to really interrogate what tourists are doing from different origin markets, and conducted analysis that showed that, in fact, long-range travelers are the best target market for the city in terms of increasing holiday shopping. And so the tourism agency of the city put together its holiday marketing campaign based on these insights, and revealed actually that they increased their marketing activities, getting to 70 million hits just for that one holiday season, by having a more targeted message focused on a more targeted segment. So this is just as one example. That's a lot of talk and a lot of slides. What I wanted to try to do now is to actually show you the platform, a demo, if you will, to sort of bring it to life for you a little bit. In this case, we are looking at data that we extracted for New York City. I must mention that New York City is not a current customer of Mastercard for this data. We chose the city because of the interesting demographics and, of course, New York's place as a tourism destination. So we built this demo off of New York City data. So if we look at the overview first and foremost, what we want to show is first how many people are actually booking, 14 million passengers, for a specific time period. We are looking, in this case, at the year of 2017 from January 1st to December 31st. We could interrogate specific time intervals as well. Tourists, so 14 million bookings, stay on average of 9 days. And as you might imagine, most people coming to New York are actually domestic travelers from the United States. Second most relevant from the UK, followed by the Dominican Republic. In terms of the actual spend by tourists, however, they spend on average $621 on their Mastercard when they're in New York. But as we can see over on the right here, the highest spend is actually coming from China, not surprisingly, really. We will look at those dynamics in a little bit more detail soon. Domestically, the highest spend is coming from the Los Angeles region, mostly because these are people coming from longer periods of time and spending more money. Fairfield County in Connecticut, where I live, these are day trippers that might come to New York to see a show. There'll be a lot of them, right? But they will not spend as much because they don't typically stay overnight, and so on and so forth. In terms of social media insight, we essentially try to grade overall sentiment of tourists in terms of their appreciation of New York City as a whole. We call this the Global Tourist Perception Index, and we try to index it. It would be a score of 100 if all of the social media shares were positive. What we do is we essentially, using natural language search, we score social media activity as positive, neutral, or negative, and we arrive at this composite score. In this case, 81, which compared to other destinations actually is not bad. And we also look at the product balance. By product, we mean the different types of attractions, culture versus nightlife versus restaurants versus active activities. New York is not very well balanced. Full balance would be a score of 100, right? Certainly, restaurants and cultural activities are a lot more popular and a lot more positively perceived than, for example, nature, right, or active lifestyle, with the exception of Central Park, of course. Then we start to drill down into this funnel. So if we start with people's search behavior, for example, we can compare two countries' search behaviors. Let's just, for the fun of it, let's try to look at the UK's behavior versus Germany's search behavior when it comes to searching for their trip to New York. On average, across all destinations, searches are up 30% over the previous year. When searching, consumers are putting in a stay duration of, on average, of 11 days. We'll see in a second whether that's actually borne out by their booking behavior. And they start searching 2 to 3 months in advance. If I look at the UK then, their searches are up by just 5% year over year. They tend to stay for 9 days, and they plan well ahead of time. We also look at when in this time period, so looking at the seasonality of when people are searching, mostly in the tail end of the year. We also look at the actual weekday on which they search. So Sunday seems to be the most popular day to start thinking about your trip to New York. Germans are up a little bit more, 7% year over year, and they tend to spend for longer periods of time. As the search behavior shows, Germans seem to be interested in the Christmas shopping period, They also tend to do their searching during the weekdays. I guess they don't work as hard as the Brits, spending some time at work searching for their next vacation, their next trip. Then we can look at pricing. For example, we look at flights, but capacity. We also look at hotel prices, just as an example. We look at data from TripAdvisor and other sources. We rank hotels between 3, 4, and 5-star hotels to arrive at an average, right, of pricing for hotels. This is a good indication for a destination to understand whether its hotel prices are competitive with other locations, whether its hotel prices are increasing rapidly in a period that might be worrisome and might discourage some tourists, etc. And then let's look at bookings. So this, again, is data that we are sourcing from the GDSs. Let's look at how the UK and Germany now book rather than search. So again, I will select these two countries to drill down on. So on average, total passenger volume 14 million. We talked about that before, 9 days of stay, and they actually purchase tickets 38 days in advance. The UK stays for 10 days with a purchase 60 days in advance and doesn't show very much seasonality in terms of booking. What we do see is that they do tend to book on Tuesdays predominantly. So maybe if you have digital media campaigns, understanding which day of the week is most prominently used by tourists from different destinations could help inform your marketing strategy. Germans, there's about half as many Germans as Brits arriving. They tend to stay a little bit longer, book 73 days in advance. And similarly as the Brits, Tuesdays and Wednesdays seem to be big booking days. So the notion of this tool is simply that you can break down different origin markets to query in a little bit more detail what their search behaviors look like and what their actual booking behaviors look like. Now, next I want to actually look at spend. So starting with international spend by origin. Spend is fairly seasonal. New York does see a lot of traffic of retail shoppers, right, prior to the Christmas holiday season. Top 10 countries based on spend are China, UK, Brazil, big spenders, Australia, etc. We can look at that in a little bit more detail now to see actually how different nationalities, or origins rather, are spending and what they're spending on. So if I look at China, for example, see that the average spend per cardholder is $1,500. Their spend year over year is down. That might have something to do with Forex fluctuations. It's unclear. What they tend to spend on is a lot of retail. That orange bar there, that 50%, is very high. Not very much on accommodations. They seem to be frugal. A little bit on miscellaneous, which would include anything from business services to things like jewelry, to things like transportation, etc. The United Kingdom spends a lot on accommodation. There's probably some folks here that travel not just for leisure but for business, tend to spend more on hotels. London is a great shopping destination in itself. They don't do as much shopping in New York as the Chinese do. Brazilians, again, more shopping trends and a great increase year over year as well. And so on and so forth. So you can have a closer look really at how different origins are behaving in order to inform marketing, in order to inform your retailer strategy, in order to inform what kind of tourism advertising you offer once tourists are actually on the ground. And the same data, of course, is available for domestic. Pardon me, I have to refresh real quick. I think I lost my internet connection. For domestic tourists coming from the United States, you're also able to query in detail how the top origin locations from the United States spend in New York City. What else? And then the behavioral bit. I know we're almost out of time, but I did want to mention this. So, for example, one thing we can look at is hotel satisfaction. I find that quite interesting. So if you wanted to know, for example, how happy are people coming from the UK compared to people coming from Brazil in terms of their hotel satisfaction, we can look at their global hotel satisfaction index. Bars indicate essentially that the Brits overall are happier than the Brazilians, and that is true across 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5-star hotels. That's pretty steady across the year. And we can also look at specific departments of a hotel. Are people mentioning, for example, that reception is not doing its job, that the rooms aren't clean, that the staff is not friendly? So potentially, if you're working with your hotels in your destination, you can have a better understanding of where improvements might be made, and specifically with specific traveler segments. Now, we can also go to social media perceptions based on the country. Just to make it a little bit more interesting, let's pick two countries. Let's say Canadians, who are very close by, versus the French, who I would assume always have higher standards than others. That turns out to be a little bit true. Canadians generally are more happy than the French about their New York destination. Product balance in terms of how well balanced is the tourism offering of New York City. They're both pretty equal, and they both like the weather. That's the climatic over here, pretty much the same. In terms of the number of mentions, this gives you an indication of mentions by week. There's always a spike when a tourist is in New York City. They do tend to mention it on social media when they are there on September 11th, which makes sense. In terms of individual products, for example, the French value the arts and culture of New York more. The Canadians seem to be into their food and cuisine a little bit more. Nightlife, the French appreciate a little bit more. Individual attractions, looks like the French go to Brooklyn more than the Canadians, and also the Brooklyn Bridge. These are just indications. We typically work closely with our customers to identify what exactly are the tourist attractions that are most near and dear to that destination. So we can put that into our natural language search filters for social media and for screen scraping online to really focus on the attractions that a given destination wants to promote. So these are just indicators that our developers chose based on their own knowledge of New York City. We might want to make them very different and include, whether it's specific venues, like Madison Square Garden, for example, should be on here in my view, or specific activities like concerts, etc. We also have a look, for example, at the different products in more detail. So we can look at arts versus food and active cuisine. We can filter this by nationality. We can filter this by gender. We estimate whether somebody is a male or a female based on their social media behavior. So we can drill down on some of these scores and try to get a more granular sense of the different perceptions and sentiments really of different segments. And then we can look at the map based on, let's say, by product first. So if I look at a map of New York City, if my data loads, give me just a minute. Sorry, it's a little bit slow. So here's New York. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit on Manhattan itself. Let's see where family activities are taking place. No surprise, there's some around Central Park in Midtown. There's the museums in Midtown. People mentioning JFK, I guess, in Brooklyn when they come in. But if I then look nightlife more specifically, that's a little bit more spread out. There's different specific clubs and venues, for example, Williamsburg in Brooklyn, some of the clubs over on the far west side, on the lower west side, etc. So you can get a sense really of how spread out tourism activity is. The same is true, of course, where nationalities tend to hang out when they mention different locations on tweets. If I look, for example, at where the Canadians, what the Canadians talk about when they are in New York, it's pretty localized around Manhattan. Americans, of course, themselves are far more spread out. They'll go to New Jersey, they'll go up to Harlem and into Brooklyn, etc., far more readily. They tend to roam wider. So this might also give some indications of how tourism overflow strategies are working. If the intent is to drive some of tourists outside of Manhattan, for example, more into places like Brooklyn, or into Staten Island, or into Queens, and into Harlem, then tracking on social media what different tourist groups are actually tweeting and social media Instagramming about will give you an indication of how well your tourism overflow strategies are actually working. Last point, and I know we're almost out of time, Adriana. What I find interesting about the platform is it also allows you to look at competitors. We decided for this demo just to look at London and Dubai as possible competitors to New York. So if I look at just New York and London, I I can see, different perceptions and different satisfaction scores with these two destinations, and I can go down and look at the different, what is interesting, the different origins, for example. Interestingly, about 60% of tourists to New York City are coming from the United States, whereas London only has about 35% of its tourists coming from other areas of the United Kingdom, right? Very different behaviors there. There's more Americans going to London, if you will, as a mix of total tourism than Brits coming to New York City as a mix of total tourism. In terms of product offering, they're actually pretty equal. Seems like New York has a very slight lead in terms of food and cuisine. Seems like London has a slight lead in terms of active lifestyle. We look at gender distributions and also on age distributions. They're quite similar. Hotel satisfaction seems to be higher in New York, which is a good thing because New York hotel prices are also far higher, we can see here, than London. So the quality better be higher, and it's a good thing that the perception at least matches the pricing behaviors in this case. And then lastly, just as an overview, we also, of course, offer this data for you to download in Excel format, but we also offer you download, PDF reports, etc., to share more broadly with your organization. So that is a very quick spin. I hope it made some sense through the actual demo platform, and of course, we could show it in far more detail if there's interest, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of what this tool looks like and open it up for questions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. All righty, so let's see. We have a few little questions here. The first one is, how often is this platform updated as far as the data?
Very good question. So the social media data is basically updated almost on a daily basis. It's almost a continuous flow. Our spend data, however, is only updated on a monthly basis with a specific spend lag built in. So to be clear, Mastercard has to protect the data of its cardholders, of its retailers, of its hotels, etc. So that is why we only share it in aggregate form. And that is also why we share it with a certain time lag so that no one can look at data and try to superimpose how a certain hotel chain is performing, right? So the data frequency of update, the platform in itself is refreshed every month, but the different data sets come at different frequencies, if that makes any sense, from social media daily to booking on a weekly basis to our spend data on a monthly basis.
Okay. One question that came about is how is the sentiment portion in social media? This is a sentiment overall of a particular destination, correct? Does it serve as kind of a benchmark as to what you perceive on your own social, or how can you utilize that particular data effectively?
Yes. So to explain how we do this, what we look for is going through social media posts, we identify, excuse me, where the owner originates from. So let's say I have a Twitter account that I believe is German. We can parse the information and see, is this person talking about New York City in general, or is this person talking about the Statue of Liberty specifically? We can then parse that information and infer whether it is positive, neutral, or negative social media. I've gotten a question once about how good are natural language searches on picking up on snarkiness and irony. Not that good, frankly. We're working on it. We are seeing improvement. So if somebody said, oh, this place is awful, and means it ironically, we would probably rate that as negative. That is true. So what we do is we aggregate across all of the different social media that we parse, and we categorize it based on location. So is someone talking about New York City in general, about the Statue of Liberty in particular, and then we aggregate a score of satisfaction, which is essentially saying if they were all positive, it would be 100. If they were all negative, it would be 0. And the average on where you fall in that score gives you an indication of satisfaction with that particular destination, which you can then compare to other cities or within a city to other attractions, right? Brooklyn Bridge versus Statue of Liberty, let's say.
Okay. One other question I have here is looking at it from as a tool to benchmark, correct? So we can compare from destination to destination, right? Say Antigua, compare it to Dominican Republic, for example. But then can we go and compare on a more macro level and compare on a regional basis, say the Caribbean and how it's performing versus Asia or something like that? Is that possible?
That's a great question. So there is one limitation that data has, which is if you try to go too granular, you end up not having enough data points to be statistically significant, right? Mm-hmm. So if I wanted to look at a specific block in New York City, right, I would not have enough spend behaviors, certainly not booking data, not enough social media data in order to infer anything of meaning for that block. So we need a certain level of size, if you will, and a certain level of activity in order to be statistically significant. In terms of going macro, though, the sky's really the limit. I mean, theoretically, we could create a global view of tourism sentiment, right? It just increases the data flows and the data volumes. It makes it a little bit more costly, of course, because we're aggregating more information. So, for example, booking information, I think most people on this call probably know this, comes at a price, right? The GDSs monetize their anonymous booking information. So if I wanted to buy all of the booking data for all of the world, it would be more expensive than buying it just, let's say, for Barbados. So that is something to keep in mind. There's a slight cost differential. But from a technical perspective, the limitation really is at the granular level, not so much at the macro level. Or, yes, to answer the question, yes, you can compare the Caribbean versus, let's say, the Mediterranean. Absolutely.
Okay. Would this be a useful tool to carve out a new niche when it comes to marketing your hotel product?
Yeah, so that is really what we are working hardest on. So one is to make sure that we are understanding that the current hypothesis of tourists is correct. Lots of destinations do a fantastic job really trying to understand their tourists, engaging with surveys, using reports, etc. What we're trying to do is to get to that next level of understanding not just volumes of tourists, but also the quality, if you will, and what they care about, right? And to do that in a way that aggregates information in a way you don't have to be a data scientist to digest it. So if you are interested in identifying new niches, I think there's two ways of doing it. One is looking at, are there specific tourist segments that we have overlooked, right? Are there specific origin countries that we should actually be spending a lot more time and energy on because it turns out that they're quite high quality tourists? That's one thing. The other thing is in terms of actual attractions and destinations. Let's say I'm South Africa, right? Let's say I'm responsible for marketing South Africa as a destination, and I've been making a lot of investment in the garden tour, right? The garden trail that goes through the wineries in South Africa. But it turns out that most of my best tourists end up going to Kruger Game Park. Well, then maybe I should take a step back and say, wait, I'm not putting my investment in the right places. Or if it turns out that the best tourists especially are going to a destination that really wasn't even on my radar, maybe I should start creating a niche sort of marketing campaign around a specific set of tourists that enjoy a specific type of destination or location.
Okay. So it's also a great way to maybe select who potential third-party vendors could be.
Yes, so we've been working with some. Absolutely. So we've been working also with some destination marketing organizations looking at, in detail these tourists' behaviors. And then as Mastercard, of course, we have a global brand, right? You've probably seen the priceless campaigns. So then engaging more broadly with marketing efforts to say, all right, if we have a very specific corridor that we want to address, that Mastercard is also interested in, how can we help amplify through specific offers, specific experiential offers that we create on our price list platform, so as to drive, the right kind of tourists, quote unquote, the right kind of tourists, to the right kind of destinations, the right kind of retailers, the right kind of events, etc. So I'm going to make this up now. This is pure hypothetical. let's say that South Africa realized that, very attractive tourists coming in from the Gulf countries are really interested in a sort of restaurant-rich experience of Johannesburg. They're less interested in the wildlife, and they're less interested in the wine tour. They want to have a great restaurant experience in Johannesburg. We could actually work with them and see, okay, what priceless offers do we have, and can we create with the leading restaurants of Johannesburg to package it to priceless offers, right, to feed back into the specific market of the Gulf countries. So it's turning these insights, which by themselves mean nothing, into something that is actually actionable, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question from Fiorella. She's asking, currently, at the moment, what are the countries with what countries' data do you have? Do you have anything on South America?
Good question.
I think she's talking about country of origin, like for the
country of origin.
Traveler.
Yes. So the way that we assemble this data is we do it on a case-by-case basis, and so to be clear, we would work and sit with a customer and really understand the scope of their destination, the top attractions that they want to query, what they know about their current tourism behaviors. Then we actually pull in all of the different origin countries, right, and examine who are the big travelers, the big searchers, the big spenders, right? And that is what we then would load up into the platform to create that custom data set, if you will. Now, Mastercard sees customer data from across the world. The only limitation, of course, is if somebody's exclusively using cash in a country where there is very little banking activity, then we do not see those behaviors. I'll give you a good example. I was looking at the country of Uganda. Ugandans do, of course, travel abroad, but they have so few cardholders and so few tourists abroad, then as an origin country, I cannot say much about them. It's really not statistically significant, right? Versus a country like a Brazil or versus a country like a Mexico, where, of course, the usage of electronic payments, especially when it comes to cross-border travel, is very well established.
Gotcha. All righty. So, and yeah, she continues asking, she's particularly interested in Peru, for example, but that would be...
I could look at the specifics of Peru, right? I need to run a quick... No, I could. I mean, we would basically run a quick data run and see just what exactly the data looks like, and we compare that then to some external studies to make sure it's robust, etc. My assumption definitely would be that we would be able to say something about tourists from Peru. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Okay, another question we have here is, can the information be downloaded off of the platform, or is it just viewable from the platform online?
Good question. So what you can download is, sort of a shiny, glossy PDF. If you want to have a report printout, maybe share it around, that's fine. But we can also arrange for it to be downloaded in a pretty simple Excel format or table format, comma-separated values.
Wonderful. All righty. Let's see, another question we have here. How many origin companies can you view on this in the platform analysis? Is it 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20?
Yeah. You could do more than 10. We typically do 10 standard-wise because, for one thing, if they're the top 10 countries, in our experience, that is really what both DMOs as well as hotel operators, et cetera, they want to focus on the top 10. We could do more. Again, the only limitation would be asking for something like the corridor between Uganda and Bahamas, because we may not have enough information. But if you're interested in a small country and its behaviors, even though it's not one of your top 10, we can force fit that into the model for you, of course.
Okay. There's always a concern when we're all inundated with a lot of information all the time, and there's possibly a fear of paralysis when confronted with so much data, as valuable as it is. What would be a good way to get started? Say you have this platform, you see this very useful dashboard. What are the good first steps?
That's a very interesting question, because it really goes to the heart of what we're trying to do. When we talk to our customers, it's all about, there's stacks and stacks of reports and surveys and, online digital output, etc. There's just so much to absorb. So our hope was actually trying to put something together in a way that makes it easier to digest and easier to action, right? The way that folks typically look at this information first is to test their prevailing hypothesis, right? Most people in this field have a very good understanding of who their top tourists are. They're very interested in looking to see really, are the commercial behaviors the same as the passenger behaviors? So checking to see, hey, are the people that look for me the same as the ones that book to me, and the same as the ones that spend a lot with me, right? The second point is then usually saying, okay, help me look at how I compare, right? If I'm the island of Ibiza in the Mediterranean, how do I compare to Mallorca next door, right? Both in terms of who I am attracting, how fast I am growing, what kinds of attractions I have, right? Then looking again more internally, a little bit more navel gazing. Are the attractions that I think are the most relevant actually the most relevant? Are tourists as happy as I think that they should be? I had a great insight when we ran similar data on Sydney. Sydney hotels are awful, apparently. They have terrible reviews. And that's a real actionable insight, right, for somebody responsible for the Hotel Association of Sydney to start to look into, right? Then over time, as you get more familiar with this information, one thing is you look at specific events. I have another data set that looks at a European destination right after Brexit, because the big interest, of course, is, so the pound just dropped 25%. How is this changing the flows of tourists into this destination, right? What is the impact of events? What does the future hold for me, given that the world just changed, right? That's another common query. So looking at historical behaviors, if you will, and the impact of specific events. And then really taking a step back and trying to understand, how should this inform my longer-term tourism strategy, right? If I see what I'm doing or what people are liking and not liking, if I see what my competitors are doing and what they're liking and not liking, right? Should I be looking at building out different types of attractions? Should I be partnering with different marketing partners to get my message out better, right? And start to inform those kind of longer-term decisions, if you will.
The implications are huge, are great. It's very, very wide spanning. We actually have one of your team members on the webinar, Mr. John Munoz. Let me see if I can open it up so that he can. John, are you there?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
There he is. You wanted to.
Hi, John.
Good morning. Hey, Antonia. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Great. Thank you to CHTA and the members for being on the call. I just wanted to answer two of the questions that were made to Antonia in regards to the Caribbean. On regards to transactionality, and almost 98% of the Caribbean, we're seeing that every credit card transaction that goes through our issuers. So on regards to cash, very aligned with what Antonia was referring. But for that type of peace of mind in regards to what we can see and regarding cross-border data within the market, we are 100% okay with that as of right now. Many of you are already, working with Mastercard and tourism solutions. And in the case of Peru, the same. We have been working with them. And the question is, yes, we can provide that type of data to you at this point in the market. Okay. So I just wanted to clarify those 2 points. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John, for jumping in. And as always, your market knowledge is incredible. Very helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we got 2 for 1 here. This is great. Okay, so I think we're ready to wrap up. Antonia, thank you so much for your time and for this information.
I just wanted to say thank you for this great opportunity. It's a real pleasure, and thank you, everyone, especially those of you that joined rather early in the morning. Thank you very much for your time and your attention today. Really appreciate it. A recording of this session will be made available to everyone that registered for the webinar, and it will also live on our website. So you can use this to refer to it again, and as well you will get all of the information to contact John and Antonia and everybody at Mastercard if you have any questions on how to use this really flexible digital tool that will give you amazing insights on how to do better for yourself and for your business.
So thank you again, all of you, for joining us. Antonia, thank you. John, thank you so much for participating as well. And we will see you on the next one. By the way, our next webinar is with TripAdvisor. It's happening on May 3rd, which is a Thursday. And it will be an open dialogue with TripAdvisor where you can basically ask them. We're going to give you a few insights as to new ways that they're doing business, and also open up the doors for you guys to have a conversation with TripAdvisor and ask them all of your questions and address all of your concerns. So look forward to that, and check on our social media to see what the next webinar that we have coming up will be. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.